guys, Sullivan Owen here in Philadelphia. Today I thought I would take the information that I put out over the last few episodes about how you can plan your garden for cutting and take that information and build off of it by putting together a real garden plan. So one of the first steps is for me to pull images. I can pull these from different websites, from Google, things that I save. I create my own Pinterest on my own computer. I just personally find Pinterest a little cluttered and difficult to find. So for me, I like to take screen grabs or download the images from the different websites and put them together on paper. So to not get too overwhelming in terms of color palettes, I thought I would start with one dominant color, peach. It's basically the neutral of the floral. Well, I guess the neutral would really be green, right? But peach is a very neutral flower color. So I thought we would start there. There's a lot of variety. There's lots of foliage textures that look good with it. I've basically done this for every part of my garden. And I laid it out pretty straightforward. So here's how I kind of pulled the images together. And you'll actually see I kind of group evergreen textures to one side. I start pulling in some early spring stuff. Then I've got midsummer, then we're heading into fall, and then depending on your zone, you know, if you can go into late fall to early winter. And that's the way I would really encourage you to think about plants. Plants in nurseries are what's called retail ready. They want to be eye-catching and flowering and grab you, but I really prefer to buy plants before they're retail ready, or if I can find them as bargains after their season. It's less important when you're installing the garden for it to look picture perfect right from the jump. It's better to have this idea of where you're heading. And in addition to what I think this palette looks very beautiful in a garden layout, you'll notice that all of those flower shapes and types that I had been, I know it got a little repetitive, but taking you guys through that series on how you can plan your cutting garden with your floral designs in mind, that's all here too. Basically, from the beginning of, well, from late March into early April here in Zone 7, you would have some things to snip and bring inside, and it's going to carry you through. Now, how many of these plants you do, if you can only have one of each of them, or if you decide to edit it, that's all going to change. But I hope you can see that I'm sort of building on this concept of planning my garden beds with the bouquet in mind. And I was rewriting because I've been working on launching a second channel and working on how I'm kind of ready to talk about this garden channel. And I think my gardens are like living, growing bouquets. My goal would be to look out upon my landscape and have it feel like if I blurred it out, it might feel like one of my floral arrangements on like a larger scale or on like a zoomed in detail. That's kind of how I think about gardens. And that can work in so many color palettes, seasons, locations, etc. But to me, those principles of what makes for a good floral design, they also apply to what I think makes a good garden. Now, there's not much contrast in this design, and that's because in addition to managing all the different bloom seasons and having perennials and having some bulbs and having some evergreen texture, you also, the next layer of complication is trying to put colors together. And you're going to hear, there's lots of rules in gardening about having every color represented or things like that. But to me, most people do not love wildly contrasting every color of the rainbow floral designs. And I don't think it's as effective in a landscape. Not judging, if that's your style, that's your style. But for me, I prefer to kind of keep things edited or at least put complementary colors together to create some variation and interest. And I think this year will become the year that it's most evident, but I have actually like a color flow that winds its way around my garden. So I have kind of color zones. The only other gardener I know who plants in color zones is Sarah Raven in the UK, and she also is very into design, floral design. So it would make sense that we floral designers think about things this way. Here's how I would lay it out on paper. I Googled what the average flower bed size is. I don't know how you could quantify something like this. So I basically went for 5 to 8 feet deep, and I did 25 feet long. I did threes of all of these plants. You could certainly make it bigger, make it large, make it smaller, edit out some of this. And then, just for fun, I decided to quickly sketch a full-on view, not in perspective, just kind of looking straight through. And what I like to try to draw is also the bloom cycle. My first plants that are gonna have flowers for me to pick from are gonna be the hellebores. And the Autumn Brilliance Fern is an evergreen in, I think, to zone 6 or 5. It's a very hardy fern and it holds its color. I went for a Nandina just because I think that works well in most of the US growing zones. There are wide varieties of them. Just watch out for not getting one of the ones that get super large. I like this Twilight one. Doesn't get too big if you put it. Obviously this border is going up against something, whether it's a house or a fence. I'm betting that it's going to get a little bit of shade at some point. And this is an imaginary garden, so who knows where the sun's coming, but let's presume you've got a couple little pockets of shade where you can tuck those ferns in to just kind of give some interest, winter texture. The hellebore, evergreen foliage all year. They don't love full sun, but but most of the newer ones, and I want to say Amber Gem, which is part of Winter Jewels, they can tolerate a little more sun than the traditional full shade hellebores. Moving on through the season, you can put whatever bulbs you would like, whether that's just tulips and daffodils, or if you want to expand it to anemones and ranunculus, things like that. Following that, I've got an early blooming Ito intersectional peony and an herbaceous peony, so you're gonna get about 4 weeks of bloom. The Itos bloom first. The coral charm or a coral is usually one of the later herbaceous to bloom. First year plants, these are not going to do much. If you can find them a little more mature, that might be worth the investment if you're not in the mood to wait. And while they're not going to have flowers the other 48 weeks of the year, they're pretty plants. The Ito, the intersectional, stays really low and compact. It's almost like a little ground cover, about the same footprint as a fully grown hellebore. And the herbaceous, just nice, clean green foliage. Going for one of the corals is going to let you... Going for one of the corals is going to give you a really tried and true plant. The foliage isn't prone to any kind of rust or issues. They're pretty disease resistant. Those corals are really bred for floristry at this point, so most of the rootstock that's out there is pretty good. I've got a couple types of roses. You didn't go for anything too tall, but you could certainly do climbers. I like to look for good-sized shrub roses. I'm looking for nothing really over the 4x5 footprint, but most roses, even at fully mature, are pretty spindly, so I find packing them a little bit close together and just making sure you feed them is a great way to get a little more mass to the planting, because not all roses grow into these like picture-perfect landscape specimens. And then I just went for a couple dahlias. There's no shortage of interesting dahlias that would work in this palette, and I think they're pretty charming to do some of the ball varieties, some of the tall dinner plates. If you start them in pots and kind of get them going, you can tuck them into the landscape and they'll just shoot up as the temperature grows. So that's a way to kind of sneak some of those taller things in. You just want to make sure that the plant isn't shaded by too much when you tuck it in. That's why kind of growing it on in a pot, letting it really take off, and then transferring it into the landscape. It'll take off for you. But this is really, I do this exercise not on such like a micro level, But whenever a new plant catches my eye, I make sure to grab a photo of it and think about how it's going to work in my existing plant. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it got a little repetitive there with the flower shapes with designs in mind, but I promise I'm going somewhere with this. So this is a monocolor design. I am not sure. You guys can tell me in the comments if you want to see other colors kind of put together this way, or if you want to see how I sort of build off of something like this and take it in a couple directions to incorporate additional color families in with the peach. We'll just kind of keep growing this garden on paper. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying 28 days of videos with me about my garden. I can't say we're spending too much time in the garden. It was 60 degrees over the weekend, and I got started doing some cleaning up in the very messy potager area, and then we got 5-6 inches of snow on Sunday, so I feel a little bit back at square one, but I have quotes coming on greenhouses and sheds, so hopefully I'll have an update on that soon. And I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.